Thank you. The work session of the Annapolis City Council for Thursday, April 28th, 2022. We called to order at 2:07. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. City Attorney, please present the first item.
Yes, sir. The first item on the agenda is ID 247-20, special joint session with Financial Advisory Commission on the Capital Improvement Plan, debt affordability, and other budget-related items.
Right. Welcome.
So I will kick it off and then hand it over to Public Works. So for the capital program, this is, I guess, the second year that we've operated under the new process where we have a project initiation phase of the project. So before we had three distinct phases. We had planning and then design and then construction. Now before the projects get submitted, they go through a project initiation phase, which is similar to the planning phase that we had before, whereby the scope of work is well defined, cost estimate is developed, so there's a lot more knowledge about the project before it goes into the CIP. So the projects that you see, the new projects in this year's, generally have been through that phase. The departments and hopefully City Council submits those to Public Works. They go through that phase and then they go into the CIP. Before they go into the CIP, we have a steering committee that reviews them. That's made up of myself, the Finance Director, Public Works Director, and Planning Director to review all of the projects and make sure that they're ready to be submitted. Then we discuss them with the mayor, and he agrees which projects should go forward and adds any projects that might be of interest to him. And then they come to the council. So the document that you see today that we're going to review has been through that process. Director Johnson and Assistant Director Patrick will review the CIP and the new projects and where we are on the projects that were already in the CIP from prior years.
Okay, thank you, City Administrator. Good afternoon, members of Mayor and members of Council. Mike Johnson, Director of Public Works. I would like to sort of go through in detail the items that are proposed for the fiscal year 23 CIP program. And can I just advance this way? I take it? Okay, thank you. Okay, so in the general fund, in aggregate, there's more than $63 million proposed for respective projects. And the projects are sort of bulletized here, and I will go through those in detail in subsequent slides. Okay, so that's a continuation of that. The enterprise fund projects total about a little over $11 million. And again, there are detailed sheets for that I will go through. There were some projects that were removed from the CIP this year. And these were projects in which the city either had no participation or the projects were significantly delayed, such as the Main Street rebricking, on account of work that has to be carried out on Hillman and City Dock. So the budgeted amount and the general scope was sort of obsolete. So there was no reason to keep that in the program. The parking management control system was removed, and the wayfinding signage project was also removed, as that was taken over by the consortium that is building Hillman and City Dock. We had for several years tried to engage our partners at the county and the organics resource recovery facility. They really did not seem to have much appetite for that. So we subsequently have removed that from the CIP as well, possibly to be reconstructed and brought back at some future point. But in the current iteration, it was not something that was in line with the way that they were thinking about dealing with that particular product. So I'll get into the detail of the projects. The first one is Annapolis Gateway Park. Now this is a proposed park, and if you're coming in on Row Boulevard, on the left-hand side, there's approximately a 7-acre parcel of land that has been some unhoused members of the community have sort of squatted on, and it's a fairly littered site, but it is a gateway to the city. So the idea is to turn this into a park which would have like a community boathouse and other amenities. The final scope would be finalized by community input. And the first phase, beyond cleaning up the site, which with our partners at the county we are working on, would be to develop a planning phase, go through a planning phase to determine exactly flesh out what the scope of work should be. So the $63,000 being requested in this year's budget is to cover that. Another park is Annapolis Walk Park improvements. This is an existing park in the Annapolis Walk subdivision and is proposed to repurpose the park to include both active and passive elements. Some of the improvements proposed would be volleyball court, picnic tables, benches, and possibly a soccer field. A feasibility study and design is proposed for this coming fiscal year, and the project scope will be finalized again with community input, and $56,300 is requested to fund that. The Burgess House. This is an historic property that was acquired as surplus property from the state of Maryland. It's broken into two phases. Phase one would be elevating and stabilizing the structure as it tends to flood and be impacted by the frequent flooding that occurs in the Dock Street area. And then phase two would be selective demolition and rehabilitation of the structure. And the contractor who would work on this and all the design professionals would be certified to work on historic structures so that they have the correct context for what that design should find, final materials used and work practices are to make sure they're consistent with the character of that structure. The final scope of work will have to be coordinated with the City Dock Resiliency and Revitalization project because it is within their project area for the City Dock improvement. Design and construction are proposed, at least phase one is proposed for fiscal year 23. And the final scope will also have some community input, as is normal for a project like this. To fund this, $345,896 are requested in this year's budget, fiscal year 23. The Tonia Cars Beach Park. This was a very historic site with a lot of significance to the Chesapeake Bay and to the African American community within the city of Annapolis. And this is for the acquisition of a 5.17 acre parcel of land. And a new park would be designed and subsequently constructed. It's planned, at least in the very schematic phase, to have a community education component focusing on the African American contribution to life along the Chesapeake Bay. And $8.5 million is requested for fiscal year 23, and grants are proposed to fund this project. Cedar Park sidewalks. This is installation of a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk along the south side of Cedar Park Road. The limits of the work are from Windell Avenue to Halsey Road. where the existing sidewalk ribbon ends. And a temporary sidewalk walkway had been installed to sort of field test its location and function. That was successful. And this funding here will fund the design and the construction of the new sidewalk. And the cost is $72,952. This is the capstone project for the city, I guess you could call it that. This is a really big and important one for the city of Annapolis and for our region in general. This is a City Dock Resilience and Revitalization project. And it is expected to be funded around a little over $41.6 million. This is a multifaceted project that will revitalize the City Dock area while eliminating both tidal and storm surge effects, which tend to cause inundation to the business district and impact the economy of the city adversely. It will also, some of the other benefits will be a reduction of the heat island effect. It will have a very enhanced public space to sort of draw people to sort of recreate, along the shore. It will provide a flood protection barrier, a pump station, and as mentioned, 41.6 million is requested in fiscal year 23, with a little over $19 million to come from grants. City facility improvements. This is annual funding for major repair of existing city facilities. Some of the items that are covered are roofs, windows, restroom upgrades, elevators, things of that nature. The focus has been on the firehouses, which are somewhat old and were very well used by our fire companies, the fire department, and the respective companies, fire companies, ladder companies. And Taylor Avenue, Eastport, and Forest Drive fire stations will be, upgrades for those will be funded, and as well as repairs to the Gott's Garage. And $700,000 is requested for this fiscal year. City facility upgrades. These are security upgrades to various city-owned facilities based on assessments by the Annapolis Police Department. And they would cover items like CCTV cameras, hardening of building shells, glazing, electronic locks, things of that nature that would sort of protect the occupants of the building from any do-batters, so to speak. And $278,250 is requested to fund that for fiscal year 23. This is another key and very exciting project, and one of the probably first in this region to sort of adopt this kind of an idea. It's a 100% electric Annapolis mobility plan. This request for funding would fund the planning, design, and operationalization of the electric transit system in downtown Annapolis and Eastport. It will allow for acquisition of the electric trolley, an electric ferry, as well as necessary infrastructure improvements and other construction that would be needed to support the entire operation. It would be supported by a comprehensive transportation study, which would serve as the basis for many key items, such as where to locate pickup points, what the exact alignment should be, things of that nature that are important to make sure that we're building in success into this very cutting edge and a very important project for the city. For this fiscal year, we're requesting a little over $1 million, of which $1 million is expected to come from grants. This is a continuing expense, capital expense. It's a facility equipment replacement for Pip Moyer Recreation Center. This is a well-used recreation facility for many of our residents. And it's always the desire to keep equipment in good working order and contemporaneous. So this provides adequate funding for this to occur. And we're requesting $52,500. And that's a standard request through fiscal year 28. The Forest Drive Fire Station renovations. The project will fund demolition replacement of deteriorating bathroom facilities, will address the need for adequate female firefighters facilities, as well as upgrade existing facility plumbing. A lot of the plumbing is old and has corroded and was encased in concrete, in the concrete flooring. And work has to be done to replace it, to repipe the facility, replumb the facility. The funding requested is $431,300 for this fiscal year, upcoming fiscal year. Our general roadways project, this is an annual project that provides for street paving within the city of Annapolis. Our performance goal is to resurface 4.5 miles of streets every year, and doing that will allow our streets to be on a 20-year paving cycle. This year, we are going to pilot new paving treatments, one of which is micropaving. The standard treatment that we use is milling and repaving, whereby the street is scarified. That's where a machine with carbide teeth comes in and removes the first 2 inches and sort of roughens it up to receive the surface course, and then a new surface course is placed on it. That is an excellent approach, but it is quite expensive and limits the amount of miles of streets that can be done. For streets that do not carry a lot of truck traffic, such as some of our residential streets and others which are sort of suitable for that treatment, micropaving, which is a very thin coating that is quite strong and extends the life of the existing pavement. It doesn't require scarification, it just requires treatment, and then that surface is sort of applied on the existing base. The old surface serves as the base, and that is a proven technology that is used by many large agencies. County governments use them, several cities use them, and it will allow additional miles of roads to be paved with the existing funding. And it's really a credit to the city that they can expend $3 million a year on continuous basis for their roadways. That's an excellent level of expenditure, and I'm sure that our streets remain in good order for the foreseeable future. General sidewalks. This is another annual program whereby sidewalks that are in poor condition are sort of replaced, and $600,000 is requested for this year, and that is a standard amount that would be requested through fiscal year 28. Hawkins Cove restoration. This is one of the projects whereby we are, with the mayor's initiative to increase access to waterways. This is in an underserved section of the city. And this project would remove the failing bulkhead as well as replace it with a living shoreline. This would then allow the goal of greater access to the water to occur. And further improvements desired by the community, such as seating and improvements of the existing trail system, will be pursued in subsequent years through additional grants. So this is a fairly large and multifaceted sort of project. But for this year, we're requesting a total of $472,500. Just to what City Manager Jarrell mentioned, in the initial iteration of this project, we had obtained a grant from CBT, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, for $65,000. Then we received some funds from a private donor that brought it up to $115,000. But when we did the PIF for this project, it was determined that really the amount of money that was needed you know, we needed another $472,500 to sort of execute the project properly. That's what happens when the scope is not fully developed, when a project is put into CIP, that the budget figures are often guesses based on similar projects, which are not truly similar when you drill down on them. So this process produces better numbers so that, you know, the engineers can deliver the project in a reasonable time frame. The Public Works Maintenance Facility. This is a long-standing project which will be greatly appreciated by Public Works maintenance staff, who have been bifurcated at Spa Road and Chinquapin Round Road for many years. And this facility will co-locate all of our operational staff in one facility. It has some advanced stormwater treatment features, as well as some environmentally sensitive storage for our salt, which our current Spa Road facility does not have. The dome that we will have at this facility will allow the salt trucks to enter into the structure before they offload, whereas currently they have to offload in front and the salt is pushed into the dome, which you know, is not as environmentally sensitive or you know, a building. This project has seen the effects of supply chain and cost increases due to materials escalating, such as steel and things of that nature. And this additional $735,000 as requested would cover that shortfall that has resulted from that, as well as from you know, delays in scheduling due to supply chain issues largely. And I've shown here some of the photographs that are, you know, as the project has evolved through its life. This is going back to last year, October of last year, when the site was being built. And this is, these are parts of the conveyance system, the stormwater conveyance system that, you know, is being staged for construction. This is the construction of the regenerative step pool conveyance system that is capable of handling the 100-year storm with no difficulty at all. It has performed admirably thus far. This is our salt dome that is being erected, and if you notice, it has an arch structure, as I mentioned, and it allows then the trucks to go all the way into the structure before offloading, which prevents salt from making its way to the surface water bodies. And this is the building number 1, I believe it is, that is currently being erected. And you can see the frames are going up, and it will soon be ready for cladding and begin to look like a building. So things are moving along quite well with this project. Melvin Avenue traffic calming. This project will fund the installation of a permanent traffic calming solution at selected locations along Melvin Avenue in West Annapolis. There's a pilot that was started, and we extended it through the end of the summer of this, I'm sorry, I have the wrong date. I'm living in the past. 2022, it should be, not 2013, excuse me. Through the end of summer of 2022. And the cost of installing the final assembly is $58,800, and that's just being requested to allow that to occur. Robert Eads Park. This park is in honor of the community activist Robert Eads. It's proposed to be constructed on Clay Street. Additional funding is requested in 2023 due to increased design and construction costs, as well as there was a $4,500 grant shortfall. A total of $121,800 is requested for fiscal year 23. Stanton Center Renovations is another very historic and vital community asset to Annapolitans. A facility condition assessment was completed, and it was concluded that the Stanton Center was in need of significant exterior and interior repairs to address code compliance issues. Renovations will include repairs to the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, other mechanical and plumbing, electrical, and interior repairs, such as corridors, restrooms, ceilings, floors, lightings, and things of that nature. Exterior repairs will also include the brick facade and roofing repairs. Also included in this is the purchase and installation of lockers for use by the unhoused in the community during the winter season. This serves as a key heating center for ensuring that all our residents are safe during the coldest days of the winter season. And a total of $1,200,000 is requested, and it's 100% grant funded.
Wow.
The traffic signal rehabilitation project. We had a few years ago a study performed by Mead Hunt, who was the consultant who did that study for us, and they looked at all 24 traffic signals and prioritized them in terms of their, the importance of replacing them. It was the first, the signals with the highest priority were the ones on Church Circle, and those are waiting for the completion of the water replacement project that is occurring concurrent in that area. Once that's done, that would begin. And the funding for this year, the next two sites that are in the priority list are Randall Street and Prince George Street and King George Street at Maryland Avenue. And those would be the next two that that we would develop plans for and move forward with getting those constructed. The funding request is $508,500 for fiscal year 23 and 24, and then $525,000 in fiscal year 25 through fiscal year 28. Our signals are quite old. They cannot communicate with any of the modern signals that exist. For instance, our partners at the county, our signals cannot talk to them, to theirs. The technology is just too old. And some of them are exhibiting structural failures, which, is of concern to us. And this is a very important project to make sure that roadway traffic in the city of Annapolis and pedestrian traffic is safe and is efficiently done. Trail connections. This project will produce a more cohesive on-street and off-street trail system in the city of Annapolis. And this is a recommendation from the Annapolis Bicycle Master Plan that was done in 2011. The project will improve the safety of bike travel and supports the city policy of encouraging alternative transportation options, which is, healthier for our residents. The project will include planning, design, and construction, and project work may also include the obtaining of easements, as some of the proposed alignments may require easements to sort of be built. The funding request for this project is $315,000. Truxton Park improvements. This project will provide various improvements to Truxton Park as follows. There'll be a new storage facility and garage for the Parks Division, a new office facility for that division as well, skateboard park upgrades, which is the skateboard park is well used by some of our younger residents, and which will include safety and performance enhancements, and the construction of Pip Moyer Recreation Center outside basketball courts. The funding proposed for this is $828,000, and it's proposed to be grant funded. Undergrounding of service conductors and communication wiring. We hear often lots of complaints of overhead wires and the sort of unsightly appearance that they create over time. And this project will be the first step in planning for undergrounding service conductors and Service conductors being your electric lines and communication wire and cable TV, etc. Telephone, if those exist, in the Annapolis Historic District. The first phase of the project will be to commission a study, or to hire someone to do a study to perform subsurface conflict analysis and to determine the appropriate alignment. One of the challenges that older cities face, such as ours, is that there often were no records of where things were buried, but there are almost certainly conduits that were in the ground, have been there for many, many decades. And you want to determine where possible conflicts are, as this will save money during the construction phase. You really don't want the contractor to find them, because then that's going to be a change order, right? That's going to really blow the budget. So the first phase would be that. And then we would, once we have a clear alignment, we would then proceed on to subsequent phases with additional funding requests once we have better numbers in the future. So $500,000 is requested for this budget year, and it's proposed to be grant funded. The duplicate slide, excuse me. Waterway improvement projects, excuse me, we have several of those. For fiscal year 23, where we decided, the decision was to move forward with funding Cheston Avenue. So we receive annual funding from DNR for the State Waterway Improvements Grant. The project will replace the bulkhead at Cheston Avenue and add a floating dock, which is secured by pilings. The existing submerged gravel wetland will also be enhanced by removing dead plants and weeds and replacing them with plants that are native to Maryland. Funding in the amount of $173,250, which again reflects accurate costing coming out of the PIF process, is requested for fiscal year 23. And DNR grants will cover $125,000. Subsequent to this, the reason why you have this change is that we, in the past, had tended to put in the amount of money that DNR had granted the city, and that was not always the money that was needed to do the project. So the PIF process allows us to get a better accounting of what the project cost is likely to be, and therefore our ask is more in line with reality. Weems Wayland Field. This was an old trash incinerator, circa 1940. And site sampling and analysis have been completed, and we've been working very closely with MDE, reviewing the data to determine the appropriate mitigation strategy that they want implemented on that site. It was decided that a soil cap would suffice, and with a deed restriction, that property would have to be deed restricted for recreational use once the soil cap. That way you would prevent any excavation that would possibly unearth the toxic ash that is that's of concern under the site. Funding in the amount of $472,500 is requested in fiscal year 23 for the soil cover. I'm sorry, I have the wrong thing. This is West-East Expressway Bikeway, and that will connect downtown Annapolis to Parole along the former WB&A Railroad corridor. The project will consist of 3 distinct phases. That's the Inner Wee, which will connect Calvert Street to Taylor Avenue. Improvements to the existing Poplar Trail from Taylor Avenue to Admiral Drive, and the Outer Wee, which will connect Admiral Drive to Maryland 2, Solomon's Island Road, along various public and private right-of-ways. Construction work will be done in phases, probably in these 3 tranches, with an anticipated start in fiscal year 25. Funding in the amount of $865,000 is requested in fiscal year 23, with $809,000 to come from grants. The GOTS Garage, that's it for the general fund projects. These are getting into now the enterprise fund projects. So the GOTS Garage elevator replacement. The city owns and operates a parking garage at 25 Calvert Street. The garage, which was built in the early 1990s, has the two original elevators that have been in service for more than 30 years. The elevators have reached the end of their useful life. It is increasingly more difficult for maintenance staff and contractors to locate parts to replace worn out parts, so the cars are often out of service or not really functioning in the optimal fashion. This project will consist of the dismantling of the cars and the associated shaft equipment, updating and replacing electrical equipment in the machine room, and purchasing and installing new cars and controls. Funding in the amount of $252,500 as requested in fiscal year 23 to support this. Now, I did get a tickler sort of, even though we requested this, that the price for components because of the chips and so on like that have gone up, but hopefully that regularizes itself, and the number that we have put in here will allow us to replace both cars. The transportation roof replacement. In 2021, a facility inspection was conducted by MDOT MTA, and it was determined that the Transportation Administration building and maintenance building are in need of roof replacements. The administration building roof is approximately 5,000 square feet, and the maintenance building roof is approximately 4,000 square feet. Funding in the amount of $420,000 is requested, of which $400,000 is anticipated to come from grants. Our sewer rehabilitation, over half of the city's sewers are greater than 50 years old, with many of them being older than 80 years old. And this project will include the design and construction of sewer rehabilitation and identified priority assets. Most of the sewer pipes that need rehabilitation are relined, and we have an active program of relining sewer pipes using trenchless methods, which is not very invasive. You enter from the respective maintenance holes and can put the sleeve along the pipe that connects them. But some of our pump station assets will need to be replaced as the pumps age out and the structure itself has come to the end of its useful life. Sewer video inspection is also required ahead of the design to determine whether the appropriate technology is being utilized to ensure that we do not have any SSO, sanitary sewer overflows, which we have a zero tolerance for. The project also includes identifying strategic improvements that will ensure system reliability on a macro level. Funding in the amount of $4.5 million is requested in fiscal year 23, and this is funded by the sewer fund. Water distribution rehabilitation. This annual project replaces components of the aging water distribution system. Water assets are replaced in accordance with a comprehensive analysis plan that's developed using asset management practices. And in these cases, two key factors are looked at: the probability of failure and the consequence of failure. And those two metrics are used to prioritize the asset that is to be replaced. This has worked very well. It's a very good process that was instituted by City Manager Gerald when he was the Director of Public Works, and it has really worked extremely well for the system in Annapolis. Funding in the amount of $4.9 million is requested in fiscal 23 and each year through fiscal year 28. Stormwater management retrofit projects. This annual project replaces components of the storm drain system. Funds are typically used to repair failures in the system. Funding in the amount of $100,000 is requested annually from the Watershed Restoration Fund. And the final project is the Stormwater MS4 permit compliance. So this annual project funds the water quality projects to comply with the city's National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, MS4 permit, which is covered under our MS4 permit municipal separate storm sewer system permit that is issued by MDE. New and retrofit best practices are developed and designed and constructed to meet permit goals of treatment of stormwater, and funding in the amount of a little over $1 million is requested annually from the Watershed Restoration Fund to fund this. And I would avail myself to any questions that anyone may have on the presentation.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A general comment, and really more for my colleagues than anyone else, but it does not feel that there is a process to involve city council in any way when these capital projects are determined. I know there's an internal staff process, but I've been trying to do an accounting on the fly. I submitted 7 capital improvement requests twice. I don't see any of them here, and I don't know how many of my other colleagues have put in requests, but it does seem that there needs to be a change in the process early on before things get locked in, where we can at least be involved in some dialogue about what's in, what's out in this process. I think I make this general lament every year, and I can tell how far it's being heard, how much it's being heard. I noticed throughout the whole presentation that when you follow the CIP, even with your early slide talking about projects that were taken out, there are a number of other projects that you didn't mention in your presentation. There were several on waterway improvement, for example. Is that expediency, or are they dropped out too because they weren't in the presentation?
Alderman, what I was doing was going through the fiscal year 23 projects. They have not dropped out. What happened with the waterway projects is when we did the PIFs for them, based on the pricing that was needed to sort of build the projects, we moved them to further fiscal years. So you'll find that, say, for instance, Thompson is in 25, and some conduit is in 26, and so on like that. So they're pushed out into further fiscal years to balance costs as well as the staff workload, the staff's ability to actually do those projects. They cannot do 3 or 4 of those projects in the same fiscal year. They wouldn't be able to get that done. So that's really what it was. So I was just focusing on what was in 23, and that's why I did not mention that.
So I picked waterway improvements specifically because last year I asked, and we did amend the CIP to include Wells Cove, and I may have missed it in flipping through quickly, but
it's included in the operating budget because the total amount is below the $50,000 threshold. So it's in engineering division and special projects, I believe, $42,000.
okay, thank you. On behalf of my former colleagues, Alderman Kirby and Alderwoman Hinson, and our absent Alderman Gay, is Barbud Lane done? I thought there was still more work to do. I see it in here, but I thought I saw it at the very beginning of the CIP.
No additional funding was requested. I think its construction is still underway. It's not completed yet, but we don't need any additional funding to complete it. The existing funding is sufficient to finish the project, but it's not done yet.
Okay, thank you. On page 11, we talk about the improvements, and I attended the briefing for the HPC and the Planning Commission on the city dock revitalization. I think we're all very much in favor of that, but it does seem like there's a missing piece that we haven't really heard be resolved, which is how do we stop the water from coming in on Compromise Street? The last proposal I heard is for high water, we would be deploying some kind of a rubber bladder system or something which would cut across Compromise Street apparently to some high water level. Is this still a matter of work in progress? Or do we now have a solution for Compromise Street? At the briefing, we were told that 110 Compromise and the hotel had not yet indicated their desire or willingness to participate. Well, they can get their feet wet, I guess, but some of us who come across the bridge want to know how we're going to get downtown and if we're going to be able to do that during high water. So I don't know whether you're there yet, but I just saw that slide and wanted to ask about that.
That is still being worked out. They're looking at several schemes. That is a concern of the design team as they sort of are going through the planning phase, if you will, of what the appropriate remedy is to that problem. One of them could be to sort of wall off the 110 Compromise so that you don't. Our ultimate goal is that we could not, or position is that we can't really spend all this money and still have Compromise flood. That wouldn't be a good solution. So yes. We, working with the team, we'll come up with some ideas. We also plan to have a meeting with the owners of 110 Compromise to sort of make the case that this is really a win-win-win for everyone concerned, not just the city, but it will sort of ensure that it remains usable, at least for the foreseeable decade or so, that right. That sea levels will continue to rise. But the final solution has not been decided on yet. They're still working on that.
Thank you.
If I could just add one other thing. So the Compromise Street flooding for Compromise proper is out for bids. So that's the pump station that's there at the right. at the park, and the new generator building, and the rerouting of all the storm drains over to that, and then the backflow preventer. That's out for bid. So that's actually going to go first. But what Director Johnson's talking about is what we do with the private properties that are along the seawall there. So it's really a matter of whether they want to be inside or outside the bathtub, right? Right. So if they want to join us, then they will be outside the bathtub. If not, they're going to flood. If it gets up to a certain level, they won't be protected by the work that we do down there.
So if they make that decision, suppose they decide they want to be outside, they like it wet.
Well, good luck to them.
Yes, it was nice going to the Chop Tank restaurant while it lasted, but will we be doing some kind of a more permanent barrier structure? I think
but it's going to wrap around behind.
Right, it'll be right along Compromise. Yeah. Okay, exactly. So because those buildings are important, and of course we hope they're going to be part of the process, but there's a huge amount of traffic that comes across the bridge, and if there's a physical barrier across Compromise, they have no place to go.
Yeah, and I would expect that Compromise would be raised, so that would become the flood barrier over there at the tie-in point.
Right.
So,
yeah. And that does make sense.
Yeah.
And my Dutch ancestry appreciation thanks. I did want to go back, Director Johnson, and talk about slide 17, which is the micro surfacing. Yes. That sounds very exciting, and I think what I heard yesterday is it will allow us to do more streets because it's a process that isn't as intensive in what you have to do for the streets. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. If the pilot is successful, now the reason why we would do the pilot is that the texture of the road is different from a road that is milled and paved. So you often have residents who will complain about how it appears until they get used to its appearance. So you don't really want to sort of put it into the full portfolio of tools that we use without piloting, so we can sort of work out, the education and the community outreach to make sure that's something that we make sure is accepted by the community. But once that is done, and they usually accept it, the residents usually accept it, it does allow you to tremendously extend the amount of miles of roads that you can pave with. And it actually, as I was mentioning yesterday, when you look at road networks and cost, you really want to look at it on the network basis. That's the entire interwoven spider web of connected streets that make up a city. And if you introduce micropaving as one of your tools, you'll find that the overall cost of maintaining your network at a high quality goes down. And that's a big plus. So that if we're able to spend $3 million, and that's really great, many cities can't do that, but if we do that, you would get a lot more, the quality of your streets would be a lot higher. And streets that don't carry a lot of trucks, there's a healthy debate as to whether or not they really do need a full mill and repaving, because trucks are really what destroyed the roads,
So I remember then Public Works Director Gerald telling us average life of a street is 20 years. At that time, we were budgeting to repave the streets every 30 years, which didn't make sense. So we increased the amount of money in the capital budget. But did I hear you say that the micro paving has a shorter lifespan than 20 years?
They say it's around 15 or so years, somewhere in that range. It's not as exact. It depends on the heavy vehicles that use it. So I would say that 15 is felt to be a reasonably good figure. And that's based off data, I think, that Montgomery County has. They've been one of the big pioneers in using this in this region. And that's based on they have a lot of years of data of using this, and that's what they are reporting.
So once we get into doing this, we may need to adjust the math and the CIP to reflect being able to do more, but maybe not lasting the full 20 years.
I don't think it turns out that way. I think what you find will happen is that you're able to do more, and you're sort of doing, as I was mentioning yesterday, preventative maintenance on the roads, much like the way you treat your car or your washing machine or something like that. You don't run it until it blows up. Most people, right?
I do.
Right. But so by following this sort of approach, because what really destroys the roads, and I'll just get a little deeper into it, is roads have micro cracks in the surface, which our eyes don't pick up, right? But they're there. And those cracks allow moisture to enter the roads. Now, in temperate zones like we live in, that water is trapped in the matrix of the road, and then it freezes. So it expands, and then you get potholes. So you'll notice that in the winter you get potholes. Well, that's the moisture that's made it into the road. So by sealing the road, sealing the surface, sealing those cracks, which is what the micropaving largely does, you deny water the opportunity to penetrate. So your roads actually can last longer on a network basis. So your overall condition of the roads is better than if you were to just go with the very expensive alternative of milling and paving, and which, and with the price of asphalt climbing, like you never know what's going to happen with, the current global stuff with oil prices. They could go up. It directly is pegged to the price of oil. So if the price of oil goes up, you're going to find that the $3 million is not enough. So it's a way in which the cities can sort of ensure that they maintain their roads in good order without breaking the bank, so to speak, or falling behind or deferring maintenance, because often there's a threshold to what you're willing to pay. You're not going to pay $10 million to pave your roads. You probably are not going to do that. But this here allows you to keep the network in good condition, and your roads last a lot longer. You'll find that the remaining service life, which is the measure we use, will actually stabilize and produce a network performance that's much higher than just using one tool only.
Thank you for that more complete explanation. It sounds exciting to me. I hope we get to do it. I only have 2 more slides. Slide 30, which is Truxton Park, as I motor up Spa Creek to check to see if the mayor's pontoon boat is still floating, I notice a terrible amount of erosion at Truxton Park, but I didn't see anything in here that speaks to that. Is that something that we're planning to do elsewhere? I mean, it is really getting quite bad. And aside from being unsightly, I think it's an environmental issue that I think may even be more important than getting the electricity out of the water at the boat ramp. By the way, have we fixed that? The electric current?
That has not been fixed. It's, they're still working on it. It's
That is
complicated.
a strange one, but that erosion is getting worse and worse all the time. So I hope we find some money and some direction to do that.
Okay.
My last question is on slide 33, the waterway improvements again. Last year, I believe that 3rd Street on Spock, or maybe it was the year before, was near the top of getting a floating dock and improvements there. I don't see that at all. And we also know that we need improvements at 5th Street, which is near some structured parking. And both 3rd Street and 5th Street suffer quite a bit of nuisance flooding. So even if we have a floating dock, you have to wade through water to get to the bulkhead to get on the dock. So these are a couple of the things that I would have, and I did put it in my request, I think need to have some review for priority, both 3rd Street and 5th Street on Spa Creek.
Okay, I will ensure that these are not items that we've done a PIF for, so I would ensure that these are PIFed, and then we would be able to sort of have budget figures.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with email to the Finance Committee and the administration, but 3rd Street is a little bit controversial right now, but it is, it does have that nuisance flooding on a fairly regular basis. Thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation. I'm sorry it's going to be your last one.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, can you speak to Alderman Annette's capital requests? So I feel like we try to accommodate everything you bring to us. So if things have fallen through, we'd like to know why.
Yeah, absolutely, and they can come in at any time, and we'll put them into the project initiation.
I've sent them twice, but I'll send them
Okay,
again.
all right, well, they probably are in that,
All right.
that stage then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Turney, then
Thank you.
she had a hand.
I'll be
Then Alderman
brief.
Finlayson, and then Alderman Savage. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was getting silly in my brain because the micropaving started to sound like a skincare process. Anyways, I have 3 general questions and 3 Merry Christmas questions on a few of those items. In your first slide, you say that the general fund projects total $63,243,123, and that doesn't marry up in our budget book. The general fund capital budget for the general fund is $63,635,873. So I'm just fearful that we're missing a project on page. I'm sorry to throw you on page.
No, that's
it's in
okay.
the budget book, page 8.
That's okay. These are just fiscal year 23 asks. So what the number that you might be looking at, was that for fiscal year 23 or?
Yes.
It was? Okay, so I'm not sure, maybe I missed something.
Yeah, and then it's repeated again on page 10 when the sources of the fund is listed, which is my next question. On these projects, a substantial amount are grant funded, which is great, specifically the bigger ones. and I'm not sure, this might be a city manager question. How do we manage all those grants? You know, are they all managed by the respective, it would be all DPW. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, so you're talking about specifically the capital grants. So the project manager,
Right.
the ones for capital projects.
Yeah, yes,
So the
yes.
ones for capital projects should be managed by the Public Works project manager for each individual project. So they would have to make the application to the state or whoever the grantee is to actually get the grants and then keep up with the reimbursements.
Okay.
Because normally they're reimbursable, so you have to spend the money first, submit the invoices to the
Right.
grantor, so that we can get reimbursed.
Does that include the federal grant? I mean, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then somewhat related to Alderman Arnett's question, when you talk about the formation of this list, there's, reference back to the comprehensive plan, strategic plan, and what have you. So was Eric Lashinsky involved in this so that you married with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan? Since he's doing the comprehensive plan?
I did not work with, we did not really work with it. Once we get the projects, I mean, it becomes a public works initiative. So I think the interface occurs prior to the projects.
Yeah, I guess it would be prior to that in
Right.
prioritizing the project. So, okay, he probably City Manager Jarrell, do you know what I'm?
So they're very involved in some of the projects, like
okay.
some of the, like the WE and some of those. For the ones that are just strictly infrastructure projects, he's not involved with those. Those are all public works. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's very, very involved with some of the other initiatives.
Okay, yeah, I'm just looking at the language in the, in the budget book that says that this is, the approach is from strategic plan, comprehensive plan to the list of the prioritized projects. The specific ones.
Alderwoman Tierney, he did help significantly in putting those pages together.
Oh, okay, that's good to hear. Thanks. On the specific projects, Truxton Park. I was so excited I took a picture of the slide and sent it to my constituents. Does that? I'm assuming that work will take place fiscal year 2023. There isn't anything for subsequent years, so is that basically
I'm
what
sorry,
it's saying?
which project are you referring to?
Truxton Park. Sorry, I don't have this slide.
Slide 30.
Do you have it, Ross?
Those my slides.
Oh, 30. It looks like a lot of work.
Oh,
so
this, okay.
The funding is.
This project is a 25 and 26 project. It's not
Okay, so the funding is allocated in 2023.
right, and that would fund some portions of it, but the improvements to the construction would not be 23. Like I guess you would have to do the design of the skate park, and that takes longer than a fiscal year to do.
So
that.
more design work in fiscal year
Yeah,
2023.
this would fund some aspects. Yeah, you kind of knocked it off. Well, I don't know what I did. I'm sorry. Pardon me, I'm having some technical difficulties.
Oh.
What did I do? Oh. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess there would be some portions of this that could be done, but I would think that anything that has design components in it, this is also would require some regulatory work as well, and that it really couldn't be completed in one fiscal year. It would be funded
Right.
over multiple years.
Okay. I only ask because the majority of the funding is for next year, and then it skips a year, and then it goes into 25 And then 26, there's another big chunk
Yeah,
of
there's a
money.
big chunk, and that's probably the construction
Okay.
beginning and then the conclusion phase.
Right, okay. Two more specifics. The undergrounding, that's, I think, a grant from the state, and people are, think that goes a long way, but it probably will be just the study, as you say. Can we at least, do we have any idea what streets would be prioritized? Would it be Maryland Avenue?
That certainly would be one of them. I don't think we have the entire list at this point. I think
Yeah.
the final alignment would be dictated by what the test pitting determines, what the survey, buried survey, infrastructure survey determines. If you suppose you found that you had buried, utilities that were problematic to remove,
Yes.
that would sort of determine. Thank you. That would
Okay.
determine the alignment. The alignment has not been determined at this point, but I do know that Maryland Avenue is a priority street for undergrounding.
Okay,
But there'll be others, which I'm not aware of at this point.
okay. And I think that's all I have. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Finlayson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday in the Finance Committee, I heard Ms. Dickinson say that we were allocating more than we could, for projects than we could accomplish in a given time. Did I misunderstand? Well, let me ask the question I'm really trying to get to. 63.2 million is what is being requested for 23. Can we get all of these projects completed in 23?
Okay, yeah.
Whichever, whomever.
Alderwoman, yes. The way that we have broken it out, the dollar value is not always, and some of these projects are not, do not require public works project managers to do them, such as the big one, the AMRP consortium would be doing that one, the Resiliency project. That does not have much staff involvement in it, other than, some observation. So that's a big chunk of the money. But in terms of the others, the way that we have looked at this program, we have tried to be very reasonable and rational in apportioning work to staff, in addition to making sure that the funding profile is correct. So I'm confident that we can complete what we're asking for here in the timeframes that we're talking about, because we've taken an entire look at the program and made changes to allow that to occur. But that big figure, a lot of that, 41 million out of that figure is AMRP's work. It's not city
So it's
staff.
not.
There'd be minimal city staff involvement in that.
As far as I can tell, the grants that have been indicated throughout are not included. These are the total amounts without the proposed grants that we should be receiving.
Yes.
Yes.
Each project page has the cost of the project, and then the grants, the funding sources are shown in that table, the second table, and there are many grants listed there.
But are they included in the total 63.2 million?
Yes, well, yes, I mean, I gotta see what number you're referring to, but if that's the total of all projects that we're funding
On page 2.
in fiscal year 23, then yes, it's got grants in there too.
Okay.
And there is a summary here that will show you that. If you look on page 10 of the CIP book,
Okay.
it's got all of the projects summarized by funding source, so you can see that the grants are a piece of that funding source.
Okay, I'm afraid I left my book up at the mayor's desk, and I didn't want to get up during the presentation to get it, so I will look at that.
Okay.
Page 7, Annapolis Walk Park, I'm thrilled that it's in there. Is the basketball court going to be done prior to, or am I waiting, or the kids waiting? Thank you.
I think based on the meeting that we had, that we we could move forward with that. That did not have to wait for the other improvements. That did not have to wait, does not have to wait
Okay,
until the
so
other improvements.
we're moving forward. I guess we still need to meet on that.
Right, we still need to meet so that we're
Okay.
clear as to what the final scope is before we
Okay.
do any work on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Page 9. Cars Beach.
Yes.
And maybe this is a question for the mayor. Have all of these grants been confirmed for Cars Beach? I mean, there were big splashes of news in the paper about it. So have they been
So the
confirmed?
Board of Public Works just yesterday approved all the program open space funding. So that's for the city funding, the county funding, and the state side. So that's for the acquisition, and then the rest of it's coming from the federal government, $2 million for improvements to the park. So I'm not sure what I think that was approved. That was approved as part of the federal budget that was passed
That was
a
approved
month
before.
ago.
Federal or state?
Federal. It
And
was-
the
It
state,
was an earmark from Senator Cardin.
Okay.
and the chief of staff of the governor texted me yesterday to say congratulations, and
Who did, I'm sorry?
the chief of staff for the governor. So we worked closely. It all came from a visit. We went to see the governor as soon as we got into office, as soon as availability he had. We requested Cars Beach, we requested City Dock, which they produced 10 million on, so 6 or 7 million on this one, 10 million on City Dock, and then a surplusing of the land for Gateway Park. So all three things, the governor and the state came through for us in a big way.
And just to follow up on
excellent.
Cars Beach, so we're actually having the Conservation Fund purchase the property because we couldn't wait for, we thought it was going to take much longer to get this funding approved so we could buy it. So they're purchasing it. It should close probably by the end of June. So at that point, the Conservation Fund will own it, and then we'll reimburse them for that money from the program open space funding. The Conservation Fund, Bill Crouch.
And the Conservation Fund is who we approached very early on, so maybe 15 months ago, because they coordinated the deal on Quiet Waters Park. When they expanded Quiet Waters Park, they were great in making that happen. So we got the best team possible in place to make sure that we pulled this off.
I think the mayor and staff should get a city council citation.
Yeah, it's all good news, so thank you. On page 14, the 330,000 that we approved was that in one-time funding? Is that included in the mobility plan? Well, that was fiscal. I'm looking at the project though, so that was for the electric boat, right? So that's not included.
So if you're talking about the one that we just approved for FY '22 for the transit, the mobility transit, the electric, down by the,
Yeah, the all electric,
Yeah.
or the electric boat, I
so
think it was.
we can't put, when we developed this book and put it together, this project didn't have any FY '22 funding in it. But now that we have, since we produced this, put something in FY '22, we have to change the page to reflect the '22 funding that was received. So
Is that going to be an addition to or a subtraction from?
it's going to add to what's in the book, and it's going to be in the prior approved column on that page. But we couldn't put it in at that time because the council had not yet approved it.
And that's for two things. It's for the electric ferry, as you mentioned, but also for the study, the comprehensive study that we discussed as well for the system. So the
So-
infrastructure, the traffic study, the O&M, the diversity study, how we're going to make this inclusive.
And all of that was included in the 330? I thought
It
that
was
was
a
just.
little bit higher than 330, I think. I think 330 was for just the electric ferry part of it. There was another 50,000 or something that was in for the study.
So will we get a new page that will reflect all of that?
Yes.
Yes, in the final budget book, the FY '22 change will be included. Or do you want that page now?
Well, I mean, we're working on the 23 right now, but
We can,
I
we
think
can
we should
create a page
reflect
that
it.
that reflects that supplemental.
Okay, thank you. One more question, page 17, and that's the micropaving. So are we actually, well, first of all, are buses considered too heavy for these streets? You said trucks would normally not use those streets, but what about our buses?
It depends on the wheelbase and the weight. Buses are lighter, felt to be lighter than trucks. So on some streets, they can use them, but that's often a pavement management decision that the municipality would make. We could consider buses and trucks as heavy vehicles and not pave bus routes with micropaving. That's really a sort of a pavement management decision. Some agencies do it, like in Montgomery County, they have done that, and it has worked reasonably well. They have a ride-on service with the same type of buses that we have, and I've seen them perform well. Some other agencies are more conservative and don't do that. So I don't, we haven't decided that yet. As we're sort of piloting it, we would make that determination subsequent to this.
Well, my only frame of reference to this is the Safeway in my ward. Our buses used to have a stop at the Safeway, but we were kicked off their property because of what we were doing to the road.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
maybe some of our buses
Are heavier.
are heavier than.
So a decision could be made
So.
that buses and trucks are heavy vehicles, and roads that they use would not be suitable for micropaving, and that's just a pavement management decision. It's not.
So are we actually going to be doing more paving of the community streets since we can do it cheaper? In other words,
I think if the pilot is successful, when the pilot is successful, that would be, I think that would occur, that we should be able to do a lot more or shorten the period. But, right now we're probably 20 years. You could probably shorten the frequency with which you're paving. So we do have a pavement management system that is used that sort of, now you notice that there are lots of decisions that have to be made. And really, a computer is really excellent at sort of helping you make the right decision in terms of in an optimal way. So you would use all of these considerations, the miles of street, cost, other factors as variables in your model, and it would give you some suggested solutions that work. And then the pavement manager, with her judgment as to her experience with dealing with pavements in the city for a long period of time, would then tweak that. But all in all, it produces a better and a cheaper result for the city in general. I'll give a case where I worked before. As everyone knows, I worked in the city of Gaithersburg, and they did not have a pavement management system when I started working. So we developed one for them. Like, we assessed the pavements, and then we put in a pavement management system for them. And we were able to produce a network performance that was higher than the county, which gave them, they were like, yes, we beat the county once. So, we did a good job with that. And it turns out that we could actually clearly figure out the exact amount of money that was really needed to sort of keep them at this condition in perpetuity. So it works well. And it's a proven technology. The Department of Defense really developed it, and everyone else uses it.
sounds good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Director Johnson, would it be fair to say that we're resurfacing roads at a historically higher level than we ever have before?
We certainly are, Mayor. That is correct.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we could say that.
And Alderman Turner just had a follow-up question on the mobility she forgot to ask last time. Sorry,
Yeah,
Alderman
just point
Savage.
of, it appears that we did appropriate in fiscal, it shows an appropriation in fiscal year 2022 of $451,000.
The mobility plan you're talking
Yes.
about, yes, that's what Katie was pointing out to me. That just made the deadline for the book. So if you look in the prior approved column on that page, it is in there.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I guess first comments just more for the city manager, and just to echo a bit my colleague from Ward 8's frustrations with the process, and maybe it was just a bit of a communication breakdown at some point, but I'm looking at an email I sent last year on May 12th with a couple of budget amendment requests, and in particular included less than 2,000 feet of new sidewalk to be installed in the ward. And I was told to wait and follow the new process we had rather than try to amend it to last year. But I heard from Sam Bryce, I think a couple months ago on the one project, but I haven't heard anything else, and I don't see him in the CIP. These are ones I do want to get amended in there. I don't know, maybe they're just rolled into the sidewalk fund that's in the CIP, or?
Is that Spa Road that you're referring to?
Sorry?
Is that Spa Road? Is the sidewalk on Spa Road that you're referring to?
No, one is on Edgewood Road along Back Creek Park. It's basically improving that existing oyster shell trail. And Sam Bryce emailed me again a couple months ago and asking for details. The other one is 1,034 feet of new sidewalk on Bay Ridge Avenue, right at the intersection of Forest Drive, along the gas station there. And so yeah, I was assuming after my email last year that these would be included. So that's one thing I would like to try to get included in this year's CIP.
Yeah, just
Mr.
as
City Manager?
sort of a general matter on sidewalks. So, infill sidewalks are still a question that needs to be decided by the council, because right now, infill sidewalks are the responsibility of the adjacent sidewalk or the adjacent property owner. And so I think the council needs to make an informed decision on whether we take on, by changing the code, we take on infill sidewalks, because there's a huge backlog of demand for infill sidewalks that right now the city's not responsible for. The adjacent property owners are responsible for those. But if the council wants to take those on, then we need to do that with eyes wide open, because there's going to be a huge financial impact to doing that. So I think probably part of that, and I know Sam was doing a project initiation study for, I think, the Edgewood one, and had some questions about the alignment and whether we wanted to take additional trees out and some questions like that. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to respond to that, but the bigger issue is whether we are going to start doing infill sidewalks or not. And if so, then we need to change the code.
Yeah, and
Alderman Savage, I'd say,
yeah.
We all agree now it's a mobility issue, isn't it now? So we should probably think about how we change our position on that. But I think, we've got a great opportunity at Alamoya Park, because that is city property. And we do want to connect all the way ultimately to the crab facility that it's at the end there. So I think that request could go in now, right?
Well, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, that does certainly easier with the city-owned property. And maybe we'll have to talk a bit more with the law office about how to best resolve. There's no prohibition on the city installing new sidewalk, but I can see what you're saying if we're setting a precedent. So in any case, the other thing I've mentioned I'd like included is additional crosswalk, but we can discuss that separately. I do have a question. This is, I guess, more for the mayor. On the hiker-biker path, it says, at this point, responsibility has been shifted to the state and county. I think this is the one along West Street. Are we finished our portion? So is it?
I think it's in the middle of being engineered now. So Mr. City Manager can give us
I
a
think that hiker-biker is the one on 450.
The 450?
By the Naval Academy pool. So where you come down off of the Naval Academy bridge, and you drop the lane there, it's to actually add a lane of traffic there. So that's not city street. So the county and I guess the Naval Academy have agreed to cost share on that. So the county's actually submitted a CIP or a project in their CIP for that this year.
And you'll hear in Pittman's budget tomorrow that's the top of the list. So I met with Chris Trombauer yesterday. So it's very exciting for West Annapolis and for the city, because you're going to be able to come off the Seven River Bridge. They put the money in the budget to complete that. So, you know, this process takes years. It's taken us years to even get to this point, and we've been spearheading that thing, even though it's not our city property. But it's a great initiative, because now you'll be able to get to West Annapolis and ultimately through to the historic district on a protected route. So it's going to happen in this next budget. So for the county, sorry.
Good, thank you. And I guess, and just on the last question, maybe to give the city attorney a bit more information on this, more specifics. I guess one of the questions would be if one of us, for example, if I wanted to introduce a CIP budget amendment that would be installing infill sidewalk, which is not on city, on private property, but likely within our right of way, would that, if the council went ahead and approved that, would that be setting a precedent where we would be taking on responsibility for all infill sidewalk, or would it just apply to that one particular project? I don't expect an answer now, but just at some point I'd like to try to narrow that down to figure out what our options are and what we need to do. But if you want to offer one now, feel free. But
Well, we would have to look at it.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think that it would set a precedent if it was in the city right away. But one thing I've noticed about properties here in the city, there is a lot of confusion about properties and what is right away and what is in the public right away, what's privately owned. So we'd have to think long and hard about where first. Yeah. And there's probably differences based on location here in the city.
Yeah, you know, we also have some very narrow right-of-ways in some streets. Okay, a question on slide 25 for the director, for the traffic calming on Melvin. What kind of technology is being utilized there for traffic calming? Is it just enhancing what's there currently?
It's making it permanent. There are chokers that were used to narrow it, to narrow the width down to the minimum AASHTO width, which is taken from 12 to 10 feet, which is the minimum legal lane width that we can have.
Okay.
And that's the technology that's being used.
Okay.
So what was installed was temporary, and this would be a permanent installation when the pilot is over, which, you know, the residents are still in favor of that, which they appear to be.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and if we ever do manage to hire a traffic engineer, it'd be nice to, I'd like to ask the staff look at options for Edgewood Road in terms of calming on that, because I get a lot of complaints about speeding on that roadway. Slide 34, this is regarding the Weems Wayland Field and the old landfill or dump, whatever it was. So just to confirm, so we have, I guess you said we sent some data to MDE regarding the soil testing and that they wanted, but it was mentioned that, so it mentioned that we're waiting for MD to determine what kind of remediation need to be done. Is that right?
Yes, and that has been done. MD has told us that a soil cap would be sufficient, but with the property being deed restricted, a covenant deed restriction being placed in it so that it cannot be used for construction or anything, which would, you know, cause foundations to be placed in the toxic field.
So they're recommending that it be deed restricted?
I believe that I'm not sure if it's a directive, is it? Do they recommend? I don't think MD usually recommends. They sort of are telling us how we would move forward with mitigating it. So I don't think it's a recommendation. We have to comply with it.
Is that going to be any kind of significant barrier to what we're trying to do with in terms of our options, I guess, for the rest of that property? Because there were ideas of putting in, or is it too early in the process? I know because we were talking about putting in various, you know, affordable housing and other things, but.
One of the things that we have to look at there, and we are looking at it currently, is the Public Works Department has a need for access to one of its pump stations, which is in that vicinity. And in addition to that, our fueling site is located there. Now, we had, as a pilot, felt that we would abandon our underground storage tanks, which are located at that, right at the corner of Spa Road there, and go to pay at the pump using one of the fuel cards. That idea worked well until the price of fuel began to climb, and then we realized that probably it was not the best idea. So we did a pivot in our thinking, and we're looking at possibly putting in a above ground fuel island. We don't really want to have any underground tanks because they are nothing but problems in the long run. But above ground tanks might be properly sited on a portion of that parcel. So there will be a subsequent subdivision of that parcel that we would recommend that is needed for our operational and access to service our pumping stations. And you probably don't want to put in experience we've had, homes next to a pumping station, because people don't realize that they do give off odors regardless of the best efforts that you make. And staff are in there to make repairs and so on like that. So there might be a parcel reduction that we would sort of would like to talk about. And then at that point, a determination can be made as to whether or not that is viable for the use for which it is being proposed. I don't think that the entire parcel can be taken away from Public Works and put to alternate use, because it will be severely injurious to our operations and city operations in general, in terms of fueling and other operational needs that we have. Mm-hmm. So we're in the process of taking a look at that, coming up with what the concept would be, and then we're not ready to sort of discuss that yet, but very soon we would be.
Okay. Thank you. Just two more questions. And do you have any additional information on why the county wasn't interested in going in on a composting facility?
In general, I think they felt that the direction that MDE was going in, MDE is very concerned with a chemical called PFAS, PFAS, which they felt would, in trying to read the tea leaves, I don't think they had a very clear sense, but they felt that this would become a regulation fairly soon. So the technologies that they were pursuing would be ones that would destroy PFAS. And they were not so keen to participate in the vegetative composting type of idea that this facility was presenting. Now, this was them sort of, in working with the regulator, sometimes you have to make a best guess as to where they're going, because they're not always very transparent with where the direction that they'll ultimately end up with. So this was their thinking. If MD does not make that a regulation in some way or fashion in the future, this project could once again gain some support, because we do need the county to participate for it to work. We do not generate enough
that was my second question.
Yard waste to make it work. Even though we generate the biosolids, we don't generate enough yard waste to make it work. And Marcia, you've worked with it. You want to talk about it some more? You've worked with them a lot more than I have.
I think you did a good job of capturing the issues, and there's always hope that it can get revised. It's a very good project, but we do need them to partner with us.
Right.
Yeah, so for MD, I guess, because PFAS accumulates and persists in the food chain, and
right.
I guess they're worried that's going to be, if people ingest that, if it's in drinking water or whatever food they're eating, or their equipment, it's in a lot of things. Food wrappers, I guess they just found it's in Chick-fil-A and a couple other restaurants use them in their wrappers. So if they're ingested, or if it's in the food that they're composting, I guess, they're worried it's going to be in the facility that is composting the food. Is that, and then might reach into the waterway?
I think you're correct, Alderman. I think that it's called sort of facetiously the forever chemical.
Yeah.
It's one of the forever chemicals that the molecules are so fine, so small, that it's ubiquitous, that it will soon, unless really aggressive steps are taken to address it, it will soon be in everything that we use. It might even enter or be able to enter the blood-brain barrier of humans if you breathe it. So I think that as to whether or not, I don't know where the regulator stands on this or what sort of regulations they will put in place, but the county did feel that this was something that they should look for technologies that help to destroy that PFAS.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be a reasonable and a fairly rational way of approaching it. And I could understand where they are coming from, even though it is not, it does not augur in favor of this particular project. But if in some, I sort of took it out, recommended it be taken out now because it is tying up capital dollars that are sort of just riding and not really being used. They could be used for something else. And if it does become viable in the future, we generally have an idea of a very good idea of what we want to build, who the partner should be, roughly what the costs are. So it could always very easily become a capital project once again. But at this point, it would not, it's not, we don't have the support to make it happen.
Okay. Is that going to impact our ability to have any kind of, are we just going to let the private market essentially handle the composting for the city, or are we still looking at having any kind of composting capacity for?
So our yard trim is now taken to Western Branch in Prince George's County. That is our location. And they have, a very nice process of composting there.
Okay.
So that's our current location. We would prefer something a little closer. But it is a very good source for us right now to take it there.
Okay. And just as a side note, so everyone's aware, I did invite the fire chief to come to the next Environmental Matters Committee meeting on the 10th, because I noticed in their presentation at the Finance Committee, they mentioned that a state law passed, thanks to Senator Elfreth, that bans the PFAS use, I think, by 2024. And, but we still have, it's foam used for fighting petroleum fires, but we still have that PFAS foam. Apparently now we have to notify the state whenever it gets used. And we also have a lot of the firefighter personal protective equipment has PFAS in it, which is impacting firefighters, it could impact firefighters and could leach into the environment. So I invite him to come speak just to find out if that's something we could possibly ban the use of immediately, if there's a good substitute, and if we have, how much it would cost to get personal protective equipment without the PFAS for the firefighters, just as a side note. All right, last question. I guess on slide 41, you mentioned that I guess about 1.05 million goes to, it gets taken out annually for the watershed restoration. Let me see. For the stormwater MS4 permit compliance. Is that the money that's going towards Greenvest?
Yes. Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
And I apologize, I haven't had a chance yet to watch your presentation before the Finance Committee, but you may have gotten into some of this. But do you have any detail that you could provide? Maybe the Environmental Matters Committee don't necessarily need to get into it now, but in terms of how that money was used, is it all being used annually, that 1.05 by Greenvest annually, or is there some of that left over? Or just like get a better understanding of how that's been working.
I believe it's generally all used. Just let me just make sure of that. Generally, is the way that we work with Greenvest is that every year they give us we negotiate a scope of work that we want them to work on, and the particular watershed that we want them to work in. So, of the multiple sub-watersheds, the biggest one is Back Creek, and a lot of work is done in the various watersheds, and dependent on the priority that is established in the WIP, they help us to prosecute that work. So the dollar amount is negotiated to match more or less what is available to be spent. Now, if you do have money that wasn't spent in previous years, you can do more. You could sort of roll it over, but it's not down to the penny in a sense, because it's not always possible to make it happen that way. So, but generally, it's being used for the purpose that it's budgeted for.
Okay. So if Environmental Matters wanted to get into that a little more in terms of getting more details, would that be something that the department could provide, or would you recommend that we invite GreenVest to come talk about some of their projects?
Well, the department could provide, the progress and work that has been assigned and project progress. GreenVest doesn't have to, because they'll bill us. So there's no reason for them to come to speak about that. We could talk about that quite efficiently.
Okay. Is that something we could get on for May 10th, or is that too soon?
No, we could, May 10th is fine.
Okay.
We have the information.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just back on traffic calming. The Chesapeake Ave traffic calming by Bakers and Co. I'm sure that's already, but that's been in place for a while now. Is that moving to permanent as well? Because Melvin Ave seems to have moved a little faster than that traffic calming. The crosswalk and...
Actually, do you know what that is?
So we did a pilot there. We did a couple of bump outs just to try it out, but I didn't see that anywhere, or maybe sorry.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a CIP. That's over by the bakery.
No, that's
Yeah,
not
so,
okay.
Yeah.
That is moving along. The project manager, Lisa Greco, met with the stakeholders and figured out what was needed. I think they've come to a meeting of the minds, and I think that's something that we can do with our operating money. It's not a capital expense.
Yeah, it didn't look like a big thing, but it's been temporary for a while. So
yes, it'll move forward this summer here.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Well, Director Johnson, we're very happy for you that you got a great opportunity, but we certainly appreciate everything you've been doing for us, and we know we got you for a little while, but I want to let you know that we're grateful for the time you were here.
Well, thank you, and I just would take this opportunity to, thank you, Mayor, City Manager Gerald, members of council, for the opportunity for having worked with you, albeit it was a reasonably short period of time. But I find you to be a very energetic, intelligent group of folks, and I learned a lot, and I really am appreciative of the manner in which we work together. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Alderman Annette?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is energetic a nice way of keeping you hopping? Now, I wanted to add my thanks. I spoke to you earlier, but I knew it was too good to last, but we did appreciate the time we have with you, and I also would like to wish you well on the new job. And I do appreciate all of the initiative you took to look at the things that we didn't have in our code that we needed to get there, and I hope you leave Marcia a long list of those things so we can continue that work. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alderman Finlayson?
I guess I have to add my platitude. Mr. Johnson, it's been a pleasure. Having someone overseeing public works who I could pick up the phone and call to say, please get these, what were they, turkey vultures off my street. And you always responded, no matter how small or how big. Your department covers every aspect of our city, and everything under your leadership. Not that I'm saying anything about our previous administrator, so please don't take it that way. But it was just a pleasure. So our loss is PG's gain. So good luck.
Thank you very much, Alderman.
Thank you. Alderman Tierney?
Well, I when I heard the news, I was really devastated. I guess that's the word. But engineer to engineer, I really appreciated the way that you handled what was before you. And like any engineer, you're leaving the city of Annapolis in a better place, and you should be very proud. And I'm going to miss you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure working with you too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Director Johnson. Appreciate everything. And Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
The agenda is complete, Mr. Mayor.
We have
I
a
think we have-
presentation
Yeah, we have a presentation behind that.
on debt affordability for the capital projects.
Okay, we have a presentation, affordability by the Financial Advisory Commission.
It's in the small print here. It's the joint piece. Thank you.
Yes, please, thank you.
If not, I have another one. I think. Thank you, Katie. Great, thank you. You're welcome. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here. Today, I am going to provide the annual debt capacity update that examines the city's compliance with its debt service to expenditure policy based on the city's existing debt service, as well as projected debt service based off of the 2023 to 2028 CIP. So here,
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, sure, sorry.
I think you come with Joe, or Joe comes by himself. So
sorry, I'm Jennifer Dirksen. I'm with Davenport and Company, financial advisor to the city. Usually I am accompanied by my colleague Joe Mason, but he was unable to come this afternoon. So he sends his apologies. So just looking at slide 1, you'll see that starting on the left-hand slide in this chart, you'll see existing debt service. So this includes the city's outstanding debt related to both the general fund and fleet. In the next column, we've estimated new debt service based on the $50.4 million in proposed borrowing between fiscal 2023 and fiscal 2028. And this includes $12.9 million of issuance of prior approved but unissued bonds. And for this new debt service, in terms of the assumptions, it is important to note we've been conservative on the interest rate. You know, given that interest rates have been rising, for fiscal 23, we are estimating interest rate of 4%, and then we're using 5% thereafter. And we've been seeing municipal rates, you know, in the 3% range. Just to give you just a context there. In terms of the general fund expenditure column, we use the estimated fiscal 23 number that's currently included in the draft budget. And then we've grown that by 1% thereafter, which is also very conservative. And this is the same approach that we have taken over the last few years as well. And so in the last column, you can see that the resulting debt service to expenditure calculation, and you can kind of see this better as we move to this next slide. pictured here more visually. And you'll see that the city remains below the 10% target in most of the years except in 25, 26, and 28. But it still remains well below that midpoint, the 11% and the 12% upper threshold. And this is, when comparing this presentation to last year's, a number of these years were a little bit closer to the 11%. So the city is looking stronger. Part of that is just due to the growth in expenditures that has happened. So, but overall, very, very strong. On slide 3 here, this is just showing what the city's current debt capacity is, just looking at existing debt service. So this does not take into account the CIP. And you can see here at each of the different policy targets, 10%, 11, and 12. At 10%, the city has the ability to issue up to about $60 million. At 11%, $73 million, and at 12% is about $85.6 million. On slide 4, this is just an overview of proposed borrowing. So you'll see at the top line of this chart, this is from the proposed CIP, which totals about $37.4 million. The second line there includes the numbers from the proposed CIP, but then also includes that additional $12.9 million in prior approved but unissued bonds. And you can see that's really captured in 23 and 24, where we've included about just under 6.5 in each of those years. So totaling about 50.4. And this is the 50.4 that we used to come up with the proposed debt service that was on the slide 1 that we just went through. So finally, this last slide, this takes into account both the existing debt service as well as the estimated new debt service based off of the CIP, and really just shows you what additional capacity you have on top of the CIP. At each of the policy targets. And you can see here at 10%, you have about $12.5 million, but not until, sort of 2028. And then it goes up slightly at the 11% to 25.3, and then 37.9 under the 12% policy ceiling. That being said, we're not recommending that the city, go ahead and issue any additional debt above what's proposed in the CIP. This is just to provide you some, context in terms of additional flexibility that the city has. And having that additional flexibility is a positive, also for your credit ratings as well. So, in case there's an emergency, you certainly have that under each of these policy targets. But at the same time, as I said, we're not recommending that you adjust in any way. So that wraps up. Oh, sorry. That is, sorry, that's my alarm that my son is getting off the bus. So that really wraps up the presentation. As I said, this is something we've presented annually. The numbers this year look better than last year. So I think the city is moving in a positive direction, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just, can you help me understand? So on slide 1,
Yep.
I could see, so total debt service, 9 million, and then it goes up to 10 in 2025. But I just trying to understand, that looks kind of steady, right? But then when I look at slide 3, it says future debt capacity in 23, and this, I think, this is without planned. Do you have it with? So I'm just, in a couple of these slides you had, on slide 5, which I think is with the proposed CIP, 0 debt capacity 23, 24, 25.
Yeah, so on slide 5, this is really just, so it's already saying that you have your existing debt and you're going to do that 50.4 million of the proposed debt. But this is additional capacity under those various target levels. So you've already have your existing debt, you have the 50.4 that you're planning to issue over the 23 to 28 timeframe. But, under the 10%, you have an additional 12.5 million that you could issue on top of that and still remain at the 10% target. Same with the 11%. You have 25 million, and obviously it's varied through the years. You have some capacity in 23, 26, and 28, but it's really just giving you an idea that on top of the CIP, this is what else you could issue in those various years and still stay at those policy targets.
Okay, so it looks like 10 million is kind of a top end of our debt service that we can really handle and stay within that 10, 11%.
Well, the 10 million on the first page, so that is a combination of what you have existing plus what we have estimated for new debt service. And that can sort of be seen in slide 2. So you can see that, the 10 million increase in 25 and 26, you can see you're a little bit above the 10% level, but you're not even yet at the midpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Tierney?
Thank you. I think these questions are probably above my pay grade. I'm trying to understand this all. So while the debt can pay, just general questions to grasp this, while debt, can pay for the upfront capital costs, is it advisable to identify the future operating and maintenance costs and how they will be paid?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something, that, it should be considered when, putting together a budget. I can't speak.
Oh, maybe that's more of a Director
That's
Johnson question.
Yes, and if we, as we, for instance, the maintenance facility that's being finished, once it opens, there's operating costs to be incurred by all of the public works funds. It will be spread across those funds. And what we will also have some savings from the facilities that we'll be closing. So at that point in time, we'll have a good idea of what those operating costs will be. It's good to be able to project them ahead of time, but that could be kind of difficult at this point when we're going from 3 different facilities to 1.
Okay. And the other general question is, does our debt service exceed the life expectancy of our projects?
No. In order to issue the debt, your bond counsel, that's something that they assess before you're able to issue the bonds. So they'll want to make sure that the time frame that we're amortizing the debt over matches the useful life of the assets.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Anything else, Mr. City Manager or Director Dickinson? No? Okay. We appreciate the great work you're doing for us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you. All right. Mr. City Attorney?
Is there anything else from anybody in the audience? I don't have it on my agenda. If seeing none, that your agenda is completed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything else for good order, guys? All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.